The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Why Johnny Hates Sports is a best-selling book about kids in sports. It chronicles why, at a very early age, children are thrust into organized sports long before they have the necessary skills to feel successful. Fathers and mothers are asked to be their coach without having any training on how to coach. And the leagues in which kids play are governed by volunteers whose main focus becomes scoreboards, championships, and all-star games. Statistics show that close to 70% of kids will have quit by the age of 13. Most said it ceased to be fun. And that's why Johnny Hates Sports.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Why Johnny Hates Sports. This is our 19th episode, and I'm happy to say that we got voted our number one person who was the best on the show, and that happens to be Ross Smith. So good morning, Ross, and can you tell everybody just a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. Good morning. Again, thanks for having me on. My background is sports, anything that's brown involving a ball. My first word was ball. I grew up playing for all types of sports throughout the seasons, football, basketball, baseball, and actually ran track. My mom was a All-American basketball player in college, and my dad was same All-American baseball player in college at Florida State. So the background is definitely sports and everything that's involved with it. I really enjoy it. I went on to play collegiate baseball at Auburn, and then got drafted in 2009 to the MLB draft to the St. Louis Cardinals. So I did that for a few years and had a good run, met a lot of good people, and I worked in baseball after, providing private lessons and camps and clinics and things of that nature, just trying to give back to the great sport that helped me reach as far as I did.
So one of the things we want to talk about this morning, Ross, is about why Johnny hates sports, and the question is, why does Johnny hate sports? So I'm going to show you a couple little clips of video, and then we'll talk about it real quick. So
Okay.
if you could show the first one.
She did her job, moron. Go home if you don't know how to play the game.
How many times you seen anything like that, Ross, when you're growing up and people in the stands?
I'll put it this way. I have seen it before. I've seen it a lot more lately than I did in previous times.
Why do you think lately it's different than when you were growing up?
I honestly think that the advancements in technology, and more specifically the phone and iPhone and the access to the internet, being able to Google anything at any given moment right then and there, seems to make a lot of people what they feel like is smarter, or maybe experts in an area that maybe they are not. So I feel like they're maybe more comfortable to voice their opinion now than they did back in previous years.
Yeah, that's a good point that you make about the fact that we have cell phones today, and parents in the stands are a little leery about being captured with that. But a lot of them don't. They don't really realize, and they don't even care. I remember when we did the first video of shooting and trying to show the same kind of thing there, and it was a soccer game, and a woman, their kid was maybe 8 or 10 years old,
Mhm.
and this woman ran from one end of the field to the other, back and forth, screaming at the kid. And I guess that's why Robin Roberts, you remember that name? You ever heard that name before?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not All American, the Hall of Fame, one of the great pitchers with great record of all time. And he wrote an article called Strikeout Little League. And that caught my attention. I thought, what Robin Roberts is saying, Strikeout Little League. And he went in a whole bit about talking about, all the things of what's in my book, Why Johnny Hates Sports.
Right.
And the one thing he talked about is the parents don't have the emotional maturity to
Right.
be around their kids in a program like that. So,
Right.
you still have it out there. And I know when you grew up in Georgia, what were the leagues like then?
The rural kind of countryside that I was in. Everybody say hello to Johnny. The rural countryside that I grew up in, there was only one league, so I mean it revolved around that. You know, almost all year round, people were waiting on the league to open up because it was a way to get their kid into sports and to, I want to say, frankly, get them out of the house and give them something to do. But growing up, it was almost a thing where you wanted to be a coach and you wanted to be on the field to help the kids because there was nowhere else to turn. And I think people were a little bit more open to letting their kid be coached by other people because they put faith and trust in them to do their job. Um, where I think that might have shifted here recently because, again, like I said, the access to the internet and everybody's just
Yeah,
now a
we got a
professional
little
expert at
blip
everything
in
that
the
they do.
screen off. Yeah. One of the things that Ross is different, I think, than Georgia and around the country is that people look and say, "Oh, those fields that are out there, they're run by the recreation department, and the rec department, is responsible for everything that happens." But
Hmm.
that's not the case, and I don't know how it was where you were, but in most of the places of the country, you see the ball fields that are out there. Wherever it is, Northwest Park, Southwest Park, East Park, whatever, and who uses those fields are a group of parents.
Hmm.
Look at this next video, and I think you'll see what I'm talking about.
I'm just saying, we need to be more strategic here.
I agree. The last game was not our best.
See that the thing is that those are guys there that live in a neighborhood and they're out there running the program,
Hmm.
and they're plumbers, truck drivers, pharmacists, who cares, whatever they are,
Hmm.
but they're the ones that are organizing and administering sports for kids. Was it
Hmm.
like that in your hometown?
Absolutely, it was. We would have teachers, bus drivers, sheriff's deputies, anybody that, I grew up in a small town, a small community where everybody was involved. So um, you gave, well, I guess I should say that like the overall expectation wasn't really like, I would say to win because everybody wanted to win, but like it wasn't about really getting the championship. It was just making sure that it was organized fun for the kids to go out there and enjoy, a couple hours on the field. And you do learn structure and you do learn team concepts and of that nature. But the main idea was that, make sure Jimmy, Johnny, whoever it was out there on time and having fun. We weren't, it wasn't cutthroat. It wasn't like we have to win. It was fun first and organization kind of right with that, and winning was a little bit more down the line, which I think again that has since shifted in today's world too. If you're not a winner, you're not anything, and that's sad.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because there are so many leagues that are, run by that kind of parent group that it differs between sports, and you played all the different sports. And, most of the time we find in football, there's a whole different mentality of the people that are running the leagues. And
Mhm.
it is about winning at all costs. And, people are betting money on kids that are 10 to 12 years old of who's going to win the game. Did you see anything like that in the football program?
I would definitely agree with you and say that football mentality and mantra is different. Um, it was a little bit more upfront, a little bit rougher, so to speak. I didn't necessarily see any, betting or bets going on. I do know the parents had a little bit of riffraff between each other, especially the opposing people. Again, in the small community I'm from, a lot of people knew people at different schools in different areas, different communities. So anytime that the two communities met on the field and got to play, the parents were definitely full of words with the other team. But I don't know. I never saw much myself. I was so focused on playing. I was always out there on the field, so I didn't see anything.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. let's look at this next one, and I'm anxious to see what your thoughts are about this one.
You got it.
It doesn't have any voice with it, but you can see the fact that there's a guy that just got home from work and he's out there coaching his kids. I'm sure he saw a lot of that.
That's kind of like that viral clip meme of a guy that works in mine or coal shaft or whatever it may be, and he was still in full uniform, had dirt and grit all over his face, and took his kid to like a courtside NBA basketball game. It was similar to that all the time where I grew up, where you had hardworking, we called good old folk that would do their job, and then your responsibility was to look after your children and take care of your kids. So they're never late, never not there. They were always present. They just might still be in their work clothes, just trying to help out and give back to the community.
Yeah, it's interesting because people say, well, where do these coaches come from? And yeah, that's who it is. That's the dad and many times now moms are out there coaching their kids. But people say, well, how did that happen? Well, what I call Billy Jones, his father, he goes and signs Billy up at 6 years old, and they say, yeah, okay, now get in that line over there to the right. And he says, well, what's that about? And he says, well, that's just sign up and get your information about, for coaching. And he says, wait a minute, I got a job here. I got a lot to do. I ain't got any time to be out coaching my kid. They said, well, then I guess we'll have to take your kid's name off the list. And what? You got to take now, because if you don't coach, we don't have any coaches. If we don't have any coaches, we don't have any program. So that's how so many coaches get out there. And what happens is too often you don't even know who these people are. I mean, they could be criminals, they could be drug pushers, et cetera, et cetera. Did you ever see anything like that?
Yes. Unfortunately, it did. In the small town, like I said, or rural community that I grew up in, we did have people in that category that were come out later in life that they had a little bit of a rap sheet against them, and I never physically saw anything visibly with my own eyes that was detrimental, but you hear of stories all the time where Jimmy or Johnny, whoever it is, comes out and gets caught with police or by the law doing something that they shouldn't do, and they sure enough were in a position of power, or at least out there in the rec department community, giving back. And whether they meant it or not, if they're deep down not the best person, I don't think that they should be allowed to be out there around sets of kids, theirs or anybody else's.
So what do you think your parents would have thought if they found out one of your coaches was a pedophile?
I definitely don't think I would have been in that league anymore. I certainly wouldn't have been on that team anymore. But well, I mean, I can say a personal story, can I?
Yeah.
Well, I had a certain coach in high school that I think is still incarcerated to this day because of he fit that mold, that category, and it came out later that he had done some things with some underage kids, and they obviously weren't comfortable, weren't okay after, and got kind of ratted out later, and that man got in trouble and he's in jail.
Yeah, that's funny. Not funny. We talk about it, and the fact that you never know who's out there coaching your kid. I mean, my sport in high school and college was wrestling. And they found out that my high school coach was a pedophile. And they found out when I was in college that the assistant coach was a pedophile. And I'm thinking, man, how many are out there that people don't know? And so today with our organization, the National Alliance for Youth Sports, what is part of it is a background check. So coaches today have to go through a background check to find out, obviously what their background is, and that's a way to get rid of them.
I knew that it caught me off guard when I first moved down to South Florida and got into the travel baseball world as far as business side and coaching myself, that I was kind of caught off guard that I had to go through background checks, because it was something that when like I said, growing up wasn't around. It was never heard of. So caught me off guard, but it's very pleasing to know that steps like that are being taken to kind of safeguard kids against pedos and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, let's look at this next one here, and I'm anxious to see your response.
Okay.
Hey, Four Eyes, get some new glasses. Oh, keep quiet.
Ross, I know you've seen that kind of behavior before. What is the worst thing that you think you've ever seen?
I mean, I've seen a lot. I think one of the most embarrassing, I mean, that's just the word. It's embarrassing. That one, the parents think that they have to act that way. And then two, once they act that way, how they don't resent what they did or what they said or how they acted. And they don't feel embarrassed for not only their actions, but how they represent the kid that's out there. There's been a couple instances like that throughout my playing days where kind of look around at teammates and you feel like, man, I'm glad that's not my dad, or I'm not, associated or affiliated with that person, because it's just flat out, it's embarrassing. It's there's no space for that in the sport, in any sport.
Yeah, that's awful to be thinking that you're a kid and have to hear your parent do that. I saw a parent, believe it or not, an umpire made a call, and a parent is sitting in the stands. He ran over and grabbed a baseball bat out of the rack, ran out on the field, and boom, right on the umpire. So, yeah, like you said, it's what an embarrassment it must be if you're a kid and sitting there and everybody's looking at it, say, hey, look at Billy's dad, what he did. So, yeah, well, it's a lot of.
To add to that point, Fred, I unfortunately have encountered times where it's been filtered down to the kid, and the kid thinks that it's okay to work that way or act that way because the parent does it. I know of an instance where I had a set of brothers. One was a pitcher and one was the catcher at the time. And they were playing on a field where the umpire apparently was not in agreement with what way they were. I don't know. But they basically set up the umpire where they called a fastball for a pitch, and the catcher went down to act like blocking the ball when the ball was thrown directly at the umpire's face, and it hit him right in the face mask and knocked him out cold. And they tried to cover up and say that it was an accident and this and that, when it was blatantly clear as day, something that was premeditated to get, a shot at the umpire.
We're getting into the real action about why Johnny hates sports with all of those things. But, as I've said to people so many times on this show, it's not really that Johnny hates sports. The overwhelming majority of kids that play and come up like you did, that they have a great learning, wonderful experience while they're playing sports. So, those are the things that happen, and I'm sure it happened to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. It's a shame that, we have these stories that we're talking about because the sport is so beautiful. So to get it diluted the way it has been, it takes away the kind of the history and the respect in each sport, to where people look at it differently than they used to. And that's a shame.
Yeah, and people ask me all the time, well, whatever got you into this? And I say, well, first of all, I have 7 kids, and all the kids, every one of them played sports, and every one of them would come home with some kind of story. My daughter's coach was, can you believe this? The coach was getting the kids after the softball game to go into the drugstore and steal stuff from him.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Can you believe that? I mean,
that's crazy.
Story after story like that. But I know you got to get rushed for time, but I think we got one more on our list of want you to see.
Let's do it.
What this is all about, Ross, is one of the things that I talk about is really kind of almost a fallacy of kids playing sports below the age of 10.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, kids, what happens is maturing wise, you can have a kid that's 7 years old that can have a body of an 11-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
You can have the same thing or the same kid as you saw in that picture.
Mm-hmm.
He could be 7 and have the body of a 4-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So now the first fallacy of that is if you're coaching that team, who you're going to have is your pitcher.
The bigger kid.
Yeah, the bigger kid, but he's still 7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So the sad part about it is that when you get the 4-year-old, maturation wise,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the ability for tracking skills to be able to watch the ball. We did a study in Cincinnati with 6 to 8 year olds, and 51% of the kids out of 1,300 did not have the necessary skills of catching, throwing, and hitting. Therefore, what happens is they can't succeed and they can't have fun at that age, 51% of them. So no wonder by age 13, 70% of them will quit because it wasn't fun. So, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, if you get a football program with that same thing, that 7-year-old, that the coach automatically thinks, oh, that big kid, he can be our best running back, or maybe he'll be our quarterback, but whatever position we put, that's because he's the biggest kid out there.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens too is, you know, is that in his mind, he may be big, all the kids telling him that and whatnot, but he's still a 7-year-old. You ever see that?
Oh, I see it all the time. Play with a guy that we were 16 years old, and he was already 6'4", 230 pounds. He was a big right-handed pitcher from the state of Texas, and he didn't really like baseball. But it was, you know, he threw the ball the hardest on the team. You know, like he was the biggest on the team. He threw the hardest on the team, and we won a lot of games because of him. But if I were to ask him, you know, at any given point, do you like the sport? I think that he would say no, but he did it because he knew that, like, at least for the time being, that he was going to be successful at it.
Yeah. Well, listen, I really want to appreciate, thank you for being on. I appreciate it that with all your comments and things. I want to let the audience know, though, that what we talked about is we're going to do a new feature with Ross and myself, and it's going to be called Extra Innings. It's not going to be topics about why Johnny hates sports. It's going to be talking about different things that happen in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, you know, what we think about the Pete Rose deal going into the Hall of Fame. You know, a lot of other different stories that are out there. We're going to take a couple minutes to do that. Mm-hmm. And then Ross is going to talk about some of the different people that I've had a chance to meet over the years. So we're looking forward to be exciting, and so happy that Ross has agreed to be on, because it's tough for him, you know, with his job in there. You see people coming in saying, hey, where's my golf clubs? And Ross, people say, where's my tee times? And I'm sure in the other room, they're saying, where's Ross? Get him back in here.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to let you go.
No, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on, Fred. I really appreciate and enjoy the time. I look forward to it.
Well, like I say, it's been great. And you're the number one person out there after 18 people that people said, we got to get him back on. So we got you back on. We'll see you next week at the end.
You got it. Anytime. You let me know.
All right, Ross. See you now.
Take care, guys.
In this best-selling book, a child, while failing to live up to his father's expectations, is shamed and humiliated beyond belief. He vows to never allow his own son to face the same.
Well, that's the end of the show. But in addition to what we're going to do next week with Ross, called Extra Innings, is people have asked me about the book, why, Billy Jones's father. And then I said, maybe what we could do is we could play the book like a chapter at a time. So we're going to take at the end of next week, we're going to start with a chapter each week for about maybe 5-6 minutes. so that you can hear the story. And then the following week, we'll let you know what's about to happen that week, and on and on. So in addition to our regular Why Johnny Hates Sports, we're going to have a little excerpt audio from Billy Jones's father, and then extra innings with Ross and me. So we'll look forward to seeing you next Friday morning at 11 o'clock. And thanks again for joining us today. See ya.
This program is sponsored by Sir Durf Publishing in the interest for better sports for kids, better kids for life.